According to the LA Times, in 2016, over 330 million people visited national parks in the US. With the park sprawling over 84 million acres, it's easy to see how people could go missing. Most of these disappearances have no explanation, leaving victims' families and loved ones without answers. Here are 5 people who vanished from national parks and were never seen again. Number 5. Paul Braxton Fugate was a national park ranger in Arizona. In January of 1980, Paul was the only permanent member of staff on duty, as it was the off-season and the park wasn't expecting to draw in large crowds until much later in the year. He followed his normal routine on January 13th, and at 2 p.m. left his office to start a patrol of the trail and park to make sure nothing was wrong. There was a seasonal clerk at the park that day, and they were instructed to close down the visitor center if he wasn't back by 4:30 for its closing time. That was the last confirmed sighting of Paul Braxton Fugate. The Chiricahua National Monument Park spans over 12,000 acres and contains many different canyons and arroyos, and the terrain is described as tough, but Paul was well versed in the park and an experienced ranger. Oddly, he didn't take his radio with him, which he would have needed to call for assistance should he have needed it on his patrol. The only thing we know is that he took his keys and certainly not enough equipment if he'd planned to disappear. When he didn't return by 4:30 p.m., the clerk closed down the visitor center and simply assumed that his foot patrol had taken longer than anticipated. However, as the evening drew in, it was clear that something had happened to Paul. Many different agencies became involved in the search for Paul, with the NPS and local sheriff's office all pulling resources to find Paul as soon as possible. Despite their best efforts, no evidence of Paul was ever found, leaving more questions than answers for investigators and his family. One theory is that Paul found something that he shouldn't have, such as drug dealers or someone partaking in illegal activities. It's been suggested that Paul could have been murdered to stop him from reporting this, but no evidence of this has ever been found. The main prevailing theory is that Paul was either attacked by an animal or had an accident while on his patrol. Without his radio, it would have been impossible for him to signal for help. If that's the case, where is Paul's body though? As far as investigators know, there's been little to no evidence recovered. Another avenue that has been investigated is that Paul used this chance to run away and start a new life. But there is no indication that Paul was unhappy in his life or wanted to start anew. He was married and loved his park ranger job that he'd worked at for many years. Many people, including his wife, don't believe this version of events. Paul Braxton Fugate is a white male with graying brown hair and blue eyes. He also has a beard, a pronounced widow's peak, and wears glasses. He's around 5'5" to 5'10" and weighs 160 to 170 pounds. He was last seen wearing his gray National Park shirt with a bright green jacket, shorts, and green work boots. In today's time, Paul would now be 81 years old. If you have any information on the disappearance of Paul Braxton Fugate, you're urged to contact the local county sheriff's department at 520-803-3280. Number 4. Robert Bobo lived a simple life. He worked part-time as a woodcutter in the town of Prospect, Oregon, and was pleasantly sailing through life. In October of 1998, Robert set off for a lone camping trip in the Rogue River National Forest, which is situated between Prospect and Union Creek. Hunting season was opening soon, so Robert had planned to camp in a remote part of the park to avoid hunters and risk of being shot. The last confirmed sighting of Robert was at 9 p.m. in Woodruff Meadows on 700 Road on October 2nd, 1998. After this, Rob has never been seen again, and no evidence has been recovered to indicate his whereabouts. At first, friends and family took the radio silence from Robert as an indication that he had extended his camping excursion and simply wanted a few more days to soak up the scenery around him. When over a week had passed with still no word from him though, panic set in and they knew that something wasn't right. A search of the area where Robert had been camping showed no evidence to explain his sudden disappearance. At the campsite, they found his hat, 2 rifles, all of his clothes, and all of his camping gear, something he would not have left without if he'd planned to camp elsewhere. Foul play is not suspected in Robert's case. However, investigators can't rule out that theory at this point. Deputy Dan Hobbs with the Jackson County Sheriff's Office said, "It's so suspicious, we don't know what happened." The main theory is that Robert encountered trouble when he was out walking near the campsite, although his body nor any evidence has ever been recovered to back this up. Robert is one of 3 men who went missing from the park in 1998 alone, suggesting the possibility of a serial killer. Dan Hobbs also went on to say, "At this point, we have nothing to indicate foul play. Needless to say, it's suspicious in nature that he would just up and disappear like that. Basically, we've done all that we can do. I sympathize with the family not knowing, but we're grasping at straws here." Robert Bobo is a white male with mid-length blonde hair and blue eyes. He's around 5'7", 145 pounds. He has a distinctive tattoo of his name Bob on his right bicep, along with surgical scars on his stomach and upper lip. He was last seen wearing flannel and blue jeans on 700 Road of the Rogue River National Forest in Oregon. If you have any information about the disappearance of Rob Bobo, you're urged to contact the Jackson County Sheriff's Office at 541-774-6800. Number 3. This case takes us back to 1928, making the mystery of Bessie and Glenn Hyde almost 100 years old. Glenn was born Glenn Rollin Hyde on December 9, 1888, in Twin Falls, Idaho. Bessie was born as Bessie Haley on December 29, 1905, in Parkersburg, Virginia. Before the pair met each other, Glenn worked as a farmer and had even gained a degree from the University of Idaho. Bessie, on the other hand, was a student of Marshall College in Kentucky. It was during her time at Marshall College that she met her husband, Earl Helmick. The pair got together, and by June 5, 1926, they were married. The marriage certainly wasn't a happy one, with the pair living together for 2 months before Bessie moved back to her parents' home in Virginia. According to the Charlie Project, a local newspaper reported that Bessie had big plans of studying in art in San Francisco and was also apparently pregnant. The story of Bessie and Glenn begins in February of 1927, when Bessie boarded a ship from San Francisco bound for Los Angeles, California. It was on this fateful trip that the pair met and instantly fell in love. The relationship was intense and fast-moving, with Bessie filing for divorce in 1928. Originally, her husband Earl refused to grant this, which forced Bessie to move to Nevada to be granted a decree. By April 11, 1928, Bessie had been granted a divorce and was now free. Glenn and Bessie wasted no time and got married on April 12, 1928, just one day after Bessie had been granted divorce. To celebrate their whirlwind romance and rushed wedding, they spent their honeymoon boating down the Green River and Colorado River. Interestingly, Glenn chose to forgo having any life jackets on board, much to his wife's insistence. With no real destination in mind, the couple boated until they reached the ranch of Emery Cobb. His house was situated just on the edge of the Grand Canyon and made the perfect spot for the couple to take a rest and stock up on much-needed supplies. An eerie addition to this case is that whilst they were at Cobb's ranch, they had their photograph taken to commemorate their honeymoon. The intention was for the newlyweds to collect their photograph on their way back, but sadly the couple never made it back, and this became the last photograph ever taken of them. After saying their goodbyes in November of 1928, Bessie and Glenn Hyde set off for the last part of their journey. Glenn set course to Bright Angels Trail, situated in the Grand Canyon National Park. In 1928, the only way for the couple to communicate with their family would have been by letter, and when no letter arrived from the newlyweds, friends and family became concerned. They became concerned when the couple hadn't returned by December of 1928, prompting a search party to set out and look for the newlyweds. On December 25, 1928, they found what they were looking for. The boat that Glenn and Bessie had used was found in the river. The boat was fully stocked with supplies and still had their coats, hiking boots, Bessie's diary, and Glenn's gun inside. Wherever they'd gone, it's clear they hadn't planned to go far. There have been many theories, such as involvement with Bessie's ex-husband, a possible murder, or an accident that claimed the lives of the newlyweds. There's been no new evidence to support any of these theories, and their disappearance is no longer being investigated by authorities. The photograph that was meant to document their first months together as a couple has now been the last confirmed sighting of the two. Number 2. The story of Keith Reinard begins with the mysterious vanishing of Tom Young in 1987. On September 7, 1987, Tom closed his Silver Plume bookshop in Colorado. He told friends and family that he and his dog were going for a much-needed holiday. September 7th would be the final day that Tom ever closed his bookstore down for the day, and he was never seen alive again. 10 months later, in July of 1988, the body of Tom Young and his dog were found in the mountains. His death was subsequently ruled a suicide. However, no forensic ballistics tests were ever performed, and many in the local community have their doubts. Keith's vanishing ties into that of Tom, where he became obsessed with Tom's case. Keith himself even planned to write a fictional novel using Tom's case as a plot and character basis. Following the baffling disappearance, Keith took a 3-month sabbatical from his esteemed job as a sports writer for the Daily Herald based in Chicago, Illinois. Alongside writing a novel, Keith planned to use the time to improve his physical fitness by hiking the mountains and the surrounding parks. Keith had moved to Silver Plume, Colorado in 1988, leaving behind a wife and 2 children. In a bizarre twist of events, Keith took over ownership of the bookstore that Tom Young had owned a year previously. Perhaps this was an intentional move from Keith to get closer to his muse. He'd transformed the once bookstore into an antique shop and had utilized the space to facilitate his writing. Although the business wasn't doing so well, Keith remained hopeful and even had plans to move out there permanently, bringing his wife and 2 children along. The last known whereabouts of Keith Reinert are as follows. On August 7, 1988, he closed up shop for the day at around 4:30 p.m. and headed to Pendleton Mountain. His plans for that evening were to traverse the 6-hour trail through rocky terrain to the summit of the mountain. The trail was littered with loose rocks and thick brush, alongside the fact that it had no set path and was an expedition meant only for the most experienced hikers. It's important to note that Keith had never climbed the mountain alone before and had never made it as far as the summit. He hadn't taken any supplies with him, opting to take a single can of soft drink for what he thought would have been a long hike. Keith's friends said that he planned to set off for the 6-hour hike at 4:30 p.m. with the hopes of returning the same day. For a man who loved to hike, Keith was in fact scared of heights and wasn't in good physical condition. On the day that he vanished, Keith was hungover from partying the night before and wasn't in an ideal condition to take a 6-hour hike. Never mind a hike on a very dangerous trail. The evening of August 7, 1988 came and went with no word from Keith. At first, this wasn't alarming as friends and family had anticipated that the hike would have taken much longer than Keith originally thought, especially given his physical condition. By the afternoon of August 8, 1988, there was still no sign of Keith, and that's when red flags were raised. Local police soon became involved, which sparked a week-long search with over 100 volunteers, search dogs, and helicopters all looking for Keith. Sadly, in the ensuing search, one man used his plane to help the search and crashed and lost his life. This only added to the sense of loss and tragedy felt by the small community. All of Keith's writings were examined by investigators in hopes that they would lead to something or contain some sort of clues, but nothing of interest was ever found. Keith's own family didn't believe that he'd vanished of his own volition and heavily suspected foul play. Theories suggested that the person responsible for the disappearance of Keith is also linked to the death of Tom. Did Keith dig too deep and find something that he shouldn't have, or are these cases simply a strange coincidence? Other theories have suggested that Keith could be the Flat Tops John Doe, found in 2004 in Wright River National Forest in Colorado. He's never been formally linked to the John Doe, and this remains just speculation. Keith Reinert was 49 years old when he went missing from Silver Plume, Colorado. He's a white male with gray hair and blue eyes. He stood around 6'2", 210 pounds. He was last seen wearing a t-shirt, dark red and black flannel, with blue jeans and old scuffed trainers. If still alive today, Keith would be 81 years old. If you have any information about the disappearance of Keith, please contact the Clear Creek County Sheriff's Department at 303-679-2376. Number 1. Thelma Pauline Melton and her husband, Bob Melton, hitched their trailer to a campsite half a mile outside of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee in 1981. The new location was a mini holiday for the married couple, who by this time had been married for 6 years. The couple spent their time between a few different states, with the couple calling Jacksonville, Florida their home for the winter months. During the other months, the couple would travel between southeastern states, such as North Carolina and Tennessee. To the outside world, the 20-year age gap between 58-year-old Thelma and her husband seemed to be no issue to the couple. However, things are not always as they seem. Many theories have suggested that Thelma was very depressed in her marriage to an older man and was depressed about her physical appearance. In her younger years, Thelma was slim and attractive, but due to health issues, she gained weight, which made her feel quite the opposite. Thelma had been married and subsequently divorced twice before her marriage to Bob. It seemed, at least to the outside, that the third time really was the charm for Thelma. She didn't have any of her own children, but seemed to get along well with her husband's 2 sons from a previous marriage. In Thelma's life, everything seemed content. On Friday, September 25th, Thelma started her day and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. There was one activity that she did miss from her usual routine, though. Thelma normally volunteered at the Presbyterian Nutritional Center in Charlotte, North Carolina, which provided hot meals to elderly people in the area. The center was about a 3-hour, 41-minute drive from the campsite outside of the Great Smoky Mountains, according to Google Maps. It seems that Thelma mainly volunteered at the center when she was living in North Carolina, but decided to continue her charitable work following her move. For some reason, which is still unknown, on September 25, 1981, Thelma chose not to volunteer at the center that day. This could have been because her husband's health was in decline and he needed her for extra care and support that day, but the true reason has never been confirmed. At around 3 p.m., Thelma and a group of her friends set off for a scenic hike on Deep Creek Trail located in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. During the hike, Thelma was seen hastily hiking above the group. She walked over a hill out of sight of her hiking group and was never seen again. At around 4:30 p.m., Thelma's friends decided to head back to the campsite in hopes that she'd simply headed back to her trailer early. Due to her husband's ailing health, he'd stayed in the trailer alone when Thelma went on the hike. To her friends' horror, Thelma was not back at the trailer with her husband, and panic and confusion soon set in. By 6 p.m., around an hour and a half later, she was officially reported missing to the Park Rangers Service. Many missing persons cases are slow to get started, especially when an adult is involved, but luckily for Thelma, her friends and husband acted quickly and were able to kickstart the search. Park rangers set out for the Deep Creek Trail where she was last seen, only to find no sign of the missing woman. The only thing that Thelma took with her was a pack of Virginia Slim cigarettes. She had no food, water, no cash, no ID, and most importantly, none of her medication. Thelma suffered from high blood pressure and nausea, for which she was prescribed daily medication. She'd previously been prescribed Valium in 1978 for depression, but at the time of her vanishing, she wasn't taking any antidepressants, nor was there any indication that she wanted to take her own life. An important detail in Thelma's case comes from the day that she went missing, though. On September 24th, Thelma went about her routine as usual. She volunteered at the Presbyterian Nutritional Center. The one thing she did differently, though, was that she made a call to a person who to this day remains unidentified. The pastor of the center noted this being out of character, as she'd never used the center's phone before. September 25th, 1981 wouldn't be the last time that Thelma's name came up under mysterious circumstances. In April of 1982, a check in the name of Thelma Pauline Melton was cashed. The check was for an undisclosed amount, but we do know that it was an interest from a bank certificate. According to her husband, the signature was Thelma's and showed no signs of forgery. Sadly, the bank teller on duty that day couldn't remember who had physically cashed the check. The main theory in Thelma's case is that she ran away to start a new life with another new lover. Whilst their marriage seemed perfectly okay from the outside, it had been suggested that Thelma was depressed and delusioned. In her younger years, Thelma was said to have been very attractive and had a string of boyfriends and lovers. The allegation of an affair came from the pastor at the center where she volunteered. It seemed that Thelma wanted to start a new life without the hassle of a third divorce. Theory suggests that on the 24th, Thelma made a call to her lover to arrange a meeting in the park. Following the meeting, it seemed that the pair had plans of running away. Thelma is a white female with auburn hair and brown eyes. She stands around 5'11", 170 pounds. She also wore glasses and took medication for high blood pressure and nausea. At the time of her disappearance, Thelma was 58 years old. In today's time, she would now be 97. Thelma Pauline Melton was last seen on the Deep Creek Trail, located in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee. She was wearing a pink and white striped sleeveless blouse, tan pants, and a diamond-encrusted white gold wristwatch and a wedding band. She was also wearing size 8.5 tan low-cut shoes. The left shoe had a crack that ran across the ball of her foot. If still alive today, Thelma would be 97 years old since she vanished in 1981, and she's never been seen again. If you have any information about what may have happened to Thelma, please contact the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation at 615-744-4000. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads.